Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the show. My very special guest today is Ainslie MacLeod. Welcome, Ainslie.
Great to be here, Wayne. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
So we've got something in common because Ainslie grew up in a city called Aberdeen, and I trained in Aberdeen back in the day in the 90s for my medical degree. So we come from the same location, but we're actually over here on the west coast of the US. Ainslie is near Seattle, and I'm up here just outside Vancouver. But today we're going to talk about a very different component of our health. You know, Ainslie is a psychic, and he was deemed by Dr. Oz, the one and only Dr. Oz, as at the frontier of exploration into the soul and its profound influence on the physical selves. And I came across Ainslie on SuperSoul Sunday when he was talking with Oprah. So this guy's been around, but he wasn't always a psychic, you know, coming from Aberdeen.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I had to leave there to really become the psychic that I am now.
So let's say, what the hell are we doing? Well, we're going to have fun today. That's the number one thing. So Ainslie, let's just start with you. Give us a little bit of background and, you know, how you got to this place, living in the west coast of the US, and what are you up to with being a psychic?
Yeah. Well, as you were pointing out, I was raised in Aberdeen and I went to college in Edinburgh. I sort of gradually drifted west. I spent 15 years in London, moved to New York, and then eventually to the West Coast, following my intuition really pretty much all the way. Um, not knowing that, like I went through most of my life convinced I was an atheist. There's nothing beyond what we see. I thought people who believed in spirituality or religion just weak-minded, poor people, pat them on the head. And yeah, I was a real jerk at times, patronizing, thought I knew it all. And then I had over a period of years, psychics would come up to me in public places, like in a pub or something, come up and tell me, something like, my spirit guide say you're psychic, you should be doing something with it. And I mean, it happens so often that people telling me I'm psychic, you should be doing something with it. I had stock responses like, or I'd go to see a psychic and, I'd say, well, I wouldn't be paying you if I was able to do it myself, and, but I never thought of myself as psychic I mean, it's crazy looking back because my life was full of little weird moments that I couldn't explain, but the rational brain's kind of trying to make sense of it.
Mm.
And it's like finally when I realized, oh yeah, I really did sort of run into ghosts or have these, weird experiences. Sort of, yeah, I sort of was more able to own it. But I was, there was something about being a psychic that's so, weird. I actually read somewhere where it was a list of occupations, from the most noble to the ones you'd be most ashamed of. And psychic came in between televangelist and forget what it was, like, prostitute or something. It was like, so I was kind of a bit embarrassed I was really embarrassed to tell people that I was a psychic. I used to even try to find different ways to express it, and then people would have no idea what I did. So I had an epiphany. There's a few moments where I really got the message. I mean, I'd been resisting it for years, and had a couple of things that happened, but the really big one was when I was on a trip to Hawaii. I was living in the West Coast, living in the Bay Area at the time. Took a trip to Hawaii, and I ran into my deceased uncle in a bookstore there. And he'd been dead for about 10 years, but he was there momentarily and with a clear message about working together. And this came after probably half a dozen psychics saying to me, your uncle, naming him. And his name is John. So I'm just chalking it up to everybody's got an Uncle John, sort of like, but that was a skeptical part of me. But when I actually ran into him, like I say, he was there probably for about a second, but really three-dimensional. And it was like, what the heck? It changed my life. And so I sort of felt obliged to go with it. And so I started talking to him It's felt very self-conscious, very embarrassing, actually, sort of, well, sitting on my own in an empty room and talking to the spirit world. And I found I could make some connection. I could get some information. It was slow going to begin with, and then I just practiced and practiced. And he very quickly introduced me to spirit guides that I work with now, and I've been working with for, well, about 25 years now. And after practicing for quite a while, in fact, I practiced for, according to the spirit guides themselves, probably way too long before reading people. I was kind of paranoid about getting things wrong, so I was kind of like, procrastinating and finally reading people. And then over time, I just started kind of building the career, building my clientele, and finding that more and more and more as time went on, I was looking at past lives. It became like increasingly important focus. And what I was finding was that so many issues that can't be explained, or particularly when doctors say, "Oh, I don't know what it is," there's actually a past life component that we have memories that we often hold in the body that come from past lives, and we carry them into this life. And so there's not always an obvious reason in why would somebody have this particular issue. There was somebody I talk about in my last book that she was working with her. All my clients, all the sessions are over the phone, and I was talking to her about a past life where she had ended up beheaded. And I've seen this now often enough to know that when you've been beheaded in a past life, you're going to have neck and shoulder pain. There'll be some other things around the throat chakra, but neck and shoulder pain seem to go hand in hand with beheading. And I asked her about that. She said she had 20 years of chronic neck and shoulder pain, and she's a ballroom dance teacher. So she said she's always having to, she's working, she's always having to move her neck and shoulders. And the pain literally lifted in the moment and never came back. Like the moment the soul was reminded that that was a past life, it was enough for the soul to go, "Oh, right, okay, we don't have to hold on to whatever we're holding on to for this bizarre ghost memory from a past life." And she's actually turned up at a few events that I've done, a couple where I told the story, and she was going, "Oh, that was me." And yeah, still, the pain's gone. It's never come back. I think so many of us are carrying these memories, and we don't know what it is, and we're trying all sorts of things to heal them. And it could be fears, it could be phobias. All phobias are death related, all from past lives. Judgment, for example, you're judged and executed in a past life, you're going to have a huge fear of public speaking. And and that again is something that can just heal. In my experience, it's usually a few days, maybe a couple of weeks, but usually pretty quickly when you find these things. So I'm finding physical ailments, I call them Achilles body parts, fears, phobias, limiting beliefs, and the like.
Right. So, it's amazing because when you think about what we are, we're physical beings, physical bodies. We have a mental body or a mind, and then we've got a soul and a spirit. And I think most of us out there believe in the soul or the spirit. Yeah. But that's kind of left to the pastors and the priests, and it's certainly not a medical thing. But if we're going to deal with chronic pain, if we're going to deal with our entirety, then we need to look at this element. And when I read your book, the latest one, the Old Soul's Guidebook, it just opened up my mind and tied a lot of threads together. I've been open to these concepts, reincarnation, etc., for over 20 years, and it just made a lot of sense. And that's why you're on the show today, because I know this is going to be uncomfortable for people and think, "Oh wow, what's he talking about now?" But we need to, this whole show is called Solutions in the 21st century, right? Yeah. Chronic pain solutions. And you're so right. There is not a real medical answer for so many things, never mind pain, but so many things.
Yeah.
And now we're understanding through neuroscience that, we can heal through brain programming, right?
Yeah.
So you can literally get a new circuitry going on in the brain, and therefore we can cure pain. And there's so much science around that now. But what we're talking about today is like another jump in faith, as it were, another jump in level of existence, which is the energy level of us.
Yeah.
So let's talk now about, well, how do you know? Like, come on, Ainslie, how do you know that that was a past life? Like, really?
Well, the reason that I'm 100% confident it is because people don't come to me saying, I've got this pain in my neck and I find something to fit. What's been happening over the years is that I will be exploring a past life on the client's behalf. Sometimes even before they call, I'll get a past life that's significant, and then just be able to look through it and go, well, you probably have an issue with this. I'd expect this to show up and so on, because there's a pattern to these things. So for me, the validation over the years, particularly early on, was that, first of all, I would say, well, do you have a problem with your knees? And the person would go, oh, terrible, can't be able to walk for, and then the next time I talk to them, they go, oh my gosh, I got so much relief in my knees. So it's like twofold, you're finding something, it does relate, it resonates with the person, and then they get some relief from it as well.
Right. It just kind of comes up in your consults with people, and then
Yeah.
do you need to believe in this stuff for it to work?
I always say I need to believe in it, but I don't think it's that important for, no, well, I don't think you need to believe in it. I think it probably helps, but, I'll sometimes help a parent with a child. It could be
Yeah.
a 1-year-old, and they've got some issue going on. And so cognitively, the 1-year-old is probably not going to have some, some deep thoughts about, past life work or whatever. So yeah, they don't have to believe in it, but what you are doing is talking to the soul. So I'll often have a parent tell a bedtime story to a child or a baby, and it's like the principle is always this: that the soul can't separate one life from the next, because it's part of a bundle. It's part of a triad, if you like. It's like mind, body, and spirit. So your body and your mind are dying between lives. So you might at this point be on life 100, but your soul's still on life number 1 and always will be, because it's not dying in between. And so things that happened hundreds of years ago are like a memory from earlier on in this life, that your soul goes, oh, we've reason to be alarmed. Something happened in the past, earlier in our existence. And it just needs to be reminded that, yeah, that's a past life. Let it go. I've always found this the most extraordinary thing, is that it's just so simple and no fanfare. It's always like the soul just going, oh, okay, yeah, I'll stop worrying about it now. Thank you for reminding me, and just moving on, But I've seen it in all sorts of, when it comes to the physical body, so many things that we are carrying in that are directly related to trauma. For something to show up across lifetimes, from one life to the next, it has to have reached a level that it took you off your life plan, whatever your soul had planned for that life. So, if your intention was to come into this life and be a doctor, and then maybe the family runs out of money and you don't get the chance to do that, and then so you take another path, well, that can show up as maybe a fear of failure or something in the future. And then the same sort of thing will apply to physical issues. So a physical trauma, like a trauma to the brain, for example, if it's enough to take you off your soul's life plan, of course, killing you would be like the ultimate. You certainly can't complete your life plan if you're dead. So that would then show up as a big block in this life. Head trauma shows up almost all the time as migraines, chronic headaches. I mean, you can just scan the body. You can see these. I've seen all sorts of things. Someone who had their teeth pulled under torture in a past life. I asked her about that. Her teeth never grew in, like her adult teeth. She still got her baby teeth, in her 40s. Weirdest things around the throat chakra. People have been hanged. If you've been hanged in a past life, you're going to have throat chakra issues, and that will lead to, it will be connected to you speaking your truth. You might find yourself clearing your throat a lot. You might have neck pain. Keep working down the body. I mean, dying in a fire, smoke inhalation, you're going to have issues with your lungs. Reproductive issues so often related to sexual trauma. Issues around fertility related to death in childbirth in a past life. There's really not a part of the body that I haven't kind of examined in this way and found some connection. I mean, it blows people away sometimes, how can you know I have a problem with my left butt cheek? Well, it's like, simple. I just look at the past life.
So when you're doing these readings on people, is it like an inner dialogue in your head that you get insight into what's being said about?
Yeah, yes. The spirit guides I work with call it clairaudience. It's not as simple as just hearing a voice. And I find it actually really difficult to describe. It's like a knowing, and it's like I get full sentences. But in the moment when I'm receiving something, that's all I got in my head. There's nothing else. It's like, and that took a while. I'm actually working with the spirit world to find what would actually work. We tried different things, for a little while. I would get nouns and verbs like a ticker tape going past my, like that, third eye, I guess. We got with visual metaphors. The spirit guides felt that I was a bit too slow on the uptake there. So, spend too much time saying to clients, I have no idea what this means. Okay, help me out here. Or maybe I'm too literal or something. So we just settled on this, and even the purview, as they put it, what my sort of specialty, if you like, that was something we just had to hone to begin with. I didn't know, was I going to be, a medium talking to the freshly dead or finding missing objects. And I could do all those things, not with any great expertise, but I could do those things, but it wasn't really much enthusiasm. But what always fascinated me was human behavior, beliefs, and what the hell makes us the way that we are. And then I felt like discovering this, it's like going to the source and getting all this incredible information. It just still blows me away every day. I mean, I have to remind myself sometimes, because, it's like when you're doing anything every day, you just sort of like just your job, but I have to remind myself sometimes, my God, I'm talking to invisible entities and other planes of existence. How bizarre is that? Especially for somebody from Aberdeen, you can imagine.
And say, you mentioned in your book about 120 lives or so. Yeah. And we've got all these lives, one after the other, as it were. Is it like it could be like 5 or 10 lifetimes ago that you still got this issue in this one? Is that how it works?
Could be, yeah. The past lives that I look at tend to be more sort of in the last couple of 100 years. It's the more recent ones do tend to have they're more kind of up. Often with the older ones, we've worked through that in some sort of way, and so I rarely go beyond 500 years back.
Right.
It's nice when I do. I mean, I'm fascinated by history, but I would love to be able to go back to medieval times and, ancient China and learn all these things, but they do tend to be a little bit more modern. It's taught me a lot about 20th century, 19th, 20th century history, of course, and geography. A lot of times place names come up, and it's fascinating little exploration. I love finding out more about these things.
So I guess an openness to a past life being a cause is important in this work. And if anybody's listening today that's maybe open to this idea, is just to be aware that, okay, there could be a past life connection here, and if it is, well, I'll let it go. Is that as simple as that? Is that what advice would
Well,
be?
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I mean, like, it all happens, or so much happens on a soul level. You know, like, you don't, almost like your thought process don't necessarily make any difference. You know, it really seems to be so much about talking to the soul,
Right.
and you know, the soul making that connection, and that seems to be the one thing. As long as it trusts that is the past life, and so just when I'm getting past life on somebody's behalf, I don't get that much detail. You know, I get maybe where they were born, maybe, you know, some of the challenges growing up, things that shaped that life, maybe a couple of major incidents, and the death. I mean, it can be just encapsulated in 3 or 4 sentences sometimes, but something in there will be enough to remind the soul, oh, right, that's one of my past lives, and therefore I can let it go. It's that weird thing. People think the soul has all the answers, but no, it doesn't. I mean, it wouldn't come here if it had all the answers. There would be no point in showing up on the planet Earth or anywhere else. You know, it's always learning and, you know, figuring these things out.
So what is the purpose of the soul?
Well, the soul gives us consciousness. It gives us creativity, gives us the capacity for rational thought and all of that. I mean, at least the kind of souls that we as humans have. The soul really is what it gives us, things like a consciousness and a conscience,
Right.
empathy, you know, developed through the soul. It plays a huge part. I mean, without the soul, you are nothing. You're a zombie. You know, you're not going to function very well without it. You know,
and as I describe to people, you know, if without the soul or spirit, we're just a lump of cells on the ground. You know, we need energy, which is, I guess, another word for soul and spirit, just to tie the kind of maybe spiritual terms versus physical or quantum physics terms. But now they're together. Really, there's no real separation between the two, and we've got language that bridges both.
Yeah.
But yeah, without energy, we're just a lump of meat, as it were.
Right. Again, you know, for all we talk about the soul, I always feel like we don't give the soul quite enough credit or respect for all it does. And, you know, I don't know, I see healing as being such a spiritual thing. Interestingly, I've been saying this for years. I have more physician clients than any other single occupation, followed by alternative healers, coaches. You know, it's old souls wanting to make a difference, you know, and but what is interesting about all the doctors that I work with is that no matter what what area they're involved in, they're all into alternative stuff, like alternative pain management, or you know, one found me through his Reiki practitioner, another found me through his acupuncturist. You know, it's like that. They're all open to these alternative things, even if they can't make much use of them in the clinical setting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, but back in the day when I was in Aberdeen, I trained in Reiki. No, not a lot of people know this because I kept it kind of hidden, because it's not really a part of my day job. But in more latter times, you know, I've brought up I had friends say, "Luke, when can you do some Reiki sessions on this?" You know, one case comes to mind. He was an older guy who was in a stroke. He was in a coma, and my friend had a personal experience of transformational through the Reiki healing. So I started to do that, and I thought, okay, let's do this again. And so every morning now, I've got a long list of people, friends, family, and other people who I've got on the list. And this one guy, is now at home, walking, talking, getting his life back together. So, you know, when we operate in the level of spirit and soul and being open to this, you know, and I don't even say miracles happen anymore, because once you understand quanta, because everything comes from nothing through energy to whatever it is, then it's kind of normal. You know, before we were who we were, and before we were a sperm and egg, you know, the potential of us being us was zero statistically, right? Because there's no chance. You look at the statistics, but yet we're all human beings on this planet living out this journey called life and learning stuff what the soul's up to. And yeah, it's an amazing thing. So anybody listening to this is like, all right, what are you guys talking about? I would just say be open. Ask questions. Ask questions to the universe. Ask questions to God. Ask questions to a psychic. Ask questions to Ainslie, just ask questions, and we get this kind of relationship developing with our own inner self.
Absolutely.
And this knowing that you're talking about, something I've been more aware of in the last year or so, is just putting those questions out and just getting an instinct about things and just kind of going with it. It's like a door that opens up. Okay, well, let's go down this path, see what happens. And
well, that was my feeling very much when I started learning to communicate with the other side, and it struck me that I had been trying to figure out things at that point for a couple of years. So I had a sort of spiritual awakening when I arrived on the West Coast. And that was just where I heard the voice of a psychic from years before, like 10 years before, who was telling me that I'd end up in the West Coast, and I'd end up in California. I protested and went, oh, I don't want to go there. But he said, there's nothing you can do about it, nothing. And that whole conversation came back on my first night on the West Coast. I mean, like, I talk about it casually now, but it completely freaked me out at the time. I'm going, what the hell? It was like a voice in the room. It wasn't like in my head. It was like the whole thing was like, it was there to really wake me up. I mean, the spirit world had been, slapping me around the back of the head for years, trying to get me to do something and wake up. And so I'd been trying to figure the whole, mind, body, spirit, how does it work kind of thing. So when I started working with the guides, it was all about asking questions, because I couldn't, there was something that pissed me off when I started trying to get answers. Now, I read a lot of books in a very short period of time, but I was wondering, what gives the person credibility? They're telling me all the spiritual stuff. How do they know? And then I found that almost like mistakes were repeated. One person's got this idea, somebody picks it up. And so what I tried to do very much was go back to the source, and how does this work? And really kind of just be open, like you're saying, and allow my curiosity just to ask the right questions. And so I try to do that same thing with clients, where they might ask me a question I've answered 100 times before, but I won't just go necessarily with what I understand. I will check it out with the spirit guides in case there's another take or different, application or whatever. And just keep it open that way. I think there's a problem for, a lot of people when they get very fixed in their views. I used to be the same way, like I was talking about being an atheist, and this is the way the world is, and don't tell me otherwise. And discovering the spirit world really did force me to sort of reevaluate everything. And one of the things that they actually had me do in the very early days when we started communicating was to question all my beliefs. Check them out, because for a lot of us, we do get set in our ways. We have fixed beliefs from, and maybe we see things through the child that we were at the time when something happened or whatever. And actually it's extremely useful for all of us to reevaluate our beliefs. And, you find that things do change and, over time.
So true. So a couple of things you've mentioned today. One was Old Soul. That's the name of your book. So what's an old soul?
An old soul is a soul that has been on the physical plane for multiple incarnations. That's something I talk about. I talk about it in the Old Souls Guidebook. I go into a bit more detail in the instruction, my first book. But soul ages are based on your experience and how long you've been incarnating. So, if the average number of incarnations is sort of somewhere around 110, 120, then somewhere around 55 or 60 lifetimes in, you will flip from being a young soul to an old soul. There are 10 stages, all different development at each level. And then after the young soul series of lifetimes, then you'll go into more introspective lives. Actually, introspection is actually one of the signs of being an older soul. as your soul ages, you tend to become a little more spiritual rather than simply religious. Usually politically more progressive rather than conservative. Conservatism tends to be more sort of younger soul fear-based way of operating. So, you know, just the journey, as I always say, takes your soul from a place of me to we. So really learning that we're all connected, and the importance of higher values like peace, truth, love, understanding, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you know any specific doctors, PhDs, who've actually researched and found, you know, evidence for what you're talking about?
I know there are people out there. Gosh, one whose name escapes me. Gosh, Ian somebody. I'm sorry, I can't remember. I haven't read a lot of that sort of thing. I have a feeling at some point there will be like a sort of breakthrough. I think, you know, science and spirituality, you know, will meet at some point. They haven't quite done it yet. But yeah, there have been people who studied past lives from a you know, more scientific point of view. You know, questioning children who remember past lives. You know, a lot of kids will remember. They have a narrow window, but you know, it's usually between the time they're verbal and sort of veil comes down. They talk about past lives. I will say, if your child is talking about past lives, encourage them. But yeah, I think it's Ian Stevenson who wrote a very good book about that. He was studying children in India who would come back and they said, oh, I used to live there, you know, when I was in my big body, I was in that family, and then go and meet the family, and the kid would recognize people and so on.
Crazy.
It's crazy stuff, you know. I mean, I actually have a story of it if you're interested. It's like something that came up just fairly recently in the last couple of months, but it does involve somebody who's more sort of scientifically trained, and it was actually somebody over in Europe. He confided in a guy who happened to be a client of mine that he was working with. And he said he had this problem. It had been going on since he was 2 years old, where he sleepwalks. But now at the age of, is it 40 or so? I can't remember exactly. It was getting, well, over the years, it had been getting more and more serious, because he's not just sleepwalking every night, but trying to throw himself out windows. He'd actually spent, I know, it's crazy. He'd actually spent 6 months or a year in a wheelchair, threw himself out a window in his sleep, and they, you know, ended up in a neighbor's backyard, he said. And this, I mean, it had been ruling his life. He would have to tie himself down, you know, to the bed at night. Obviously, I mean, it, you know, could have killed him. You know, suicidal somnambulism, that's how I described it. And so my client said, well, what, you know, it might be a past life thing. And I go, of course, he's never, you know, he's tried everything, you know, or you know, thinking it's a neurological thing or whatever. He's tried the works, but actually, my friends, I think he bought him his first session with me, and that was all he wanted to talk about, you know. So I just said, well, look, this is such an easy one, you know. We just need to find the source, and you go away and work on it. So what I said, let's just break it into a bunch of 10-minute sessions, and we'll do one now, and then talk to me in a couple of weeks, see how you're doing. If we need to tweak anything, we can do that then. So I found a past life. It was in Norway during World War II. He'd been a young man who was interrogated. He was tied to a chair and interrogated by Nazis or Gestapo. And he had, in front of him, there was a window. And he just thought, if I could get to that window and throw myself out, I will be free of all of this. And that's all I could focus. How could I get free and just crash through the window and be, this awful experience will be over. And so I said, well, there you go. Just, take it away and just see how it goes. Maybe do some journaling. That always helps. And at the time because he's scientifically trained, he kept like a really, really detailed record of every experience, and trying to look at all connections, what might have triggered it. And so I talked to him again, probably was about 6 weeks. And I said, how are you doing? He said, well, I'm exactly 80% better. Because he got it right down to, I said, well, that's great, but it's not good enough. So let's do a little bit more work around it. We just found a few more details and off he went. Next time, he said, well, I don't even keep a record anymore. He said, it's completely gone. He no longer has that tendency. But up until that point, it'd been every single night of his life. And all he was trying to do is Saul was trying to escape, was trying to still reliving in his sleep this experience of being restrained and trying to end his life.
Wow.
Crazy stuff.
What about back pain? Because that's probably the commonest presentation for pain. And I know trauma is physical trauma, like, oh, I was lifting that big box and that's the reason I've got my back pain. Well, it's maybe a factor, but it ain't the reason. So from you,
that's the trigger. That's right. People confuse that. That's why it happened. No, you have a pre-existing weakness from a past life.
So what's the theme with back pain?
Well, there was somebody that I wrote about again in my most recent book, where she had ended her life in a box, basically, being horrible death, but being put in a tiny little box and sort of cramped and left in the sun. And when I asked her about how that showed up, she was talking about mobility. She'd never had any mobility. It had been a big issue, and I mean, it's something, that had it interfered with her ability to do certain things, sport activities and so on. And it had always been a thing. She could never touch her toes or get anywhere near that. Real lack of mobility. Again, this is one of those. Not every past life heals up, heals the present life issues like this. But it was very, very quick. I think it was kind of next day. She's sending pictures to her mom, going, little videos of her reaching her down and touching her toes, and the mom's blown away. Coincidentally, I actually worked with a mom a couple of days later, and she had a mobility issue as well that we fixed as well. I think it was like the neck. So you're asking specifically about the back. So usually it would be something like a traumatic event. But I've seen things like scoliosis from a past life showing up in some way, like some area of weakness there. I have kyphosis. I'm working on that, and that often goes back to, it can be posture issues. Of course, these things have physiological reasons. Of course, they're all stuff that we know about, but there's also this spiritual component. I've seen people with back issues where they've been shot in the back, stabbed in the back, all that sort of trauma. Hit with something. I'm thinking one client who a pile of bricks fell down on her back, and so yeah, that is it's a common. I mean, I think back pain probably, some kind of epidemic almost. I would have thought. I expect you see it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned just before we came on about writing. How does writing about things help? Because that's something I advise my patients to do a lot, is express their frustrations on paper. And, there's lots of ways to use writing to help heal. But, from your perspective, what's been working for your clients around writing and expressing?
Well, that's an interesting one, because I've actually found that people who do write a lot, the journal a lot, about the work that we do, they do tend to get I always feel I get a little bit more out of it that,
Right.
that they do tend to get some breakthroughs. I was working with somebody who I'd originally worked with like a couple of years ago, and I said to her, I'm surprised there isn't some healing from this past life that we talked about, because it looked so significant. And her take was, remind me again, what was that? And, I said, okay, I take it you didn't work on this past life. You didn't write about it. No, I don't even remember, And I think what writing about a past life or any kind of healing does, I think there's a number of reasons. One is that when you're putting things down on paper, the spirit world can see what you're thinking, what you got on your mind, and it's actually kind of good way to get some, I don't know, reciprocity going. Get some action from the spirit world as well. If you're talking about, well, here's my past life experience, and maybe here's what I'm hoping for. Then the spirit will say, oh, look, this person wants to heal their neck issue, so let's, really work with them on that. I think there's different reasons for it. I think there is a cognitive part to healing as well. It's not just all about talking to the soul, and I think that helps. I've noticed even that people sometimes get some little breakthrough past life when they're talking to somebody. They talk to their friend about what happened in the session, and there's a little bit of that sort of, like I say, a cognitive thing that then sort of seems to then maybe filter through and remind the soul. I couldn't say exactly how that works. I just do. I know that it does. So I'd always encourage that.
Yeah, writing is a very helpful tool for so many.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Awesome.
So,
you've mentioned, I'm going to ask one more question. It's about the future, because I think it's in your book, or maybe one of the talks you did. And it's about, if we continue to be open, and let's face it, in this day and age of pandemics and stuff, things are changing. We're doing consults on video now that we never used to do before. And, the future, who knows what 50 years is going to be like, 100 years is going to be like. But if we continue to advance in the areas of, quantum physics and soul type awareness, then, maybe this will be part of regular therapies.
Well, right? I really, really hope so. I mean, I've said, and I mean, I hope it happens, but I would love that 100 years from now, you go to the doctor's office and there'll be somebody like me in the corner, let me take care of the blocks and make it easier for the physician to then step in if I've found whatever is interfering. So I'm sure and like there's people who just don't respond to sometimes to treatment. There can be all sorts of reasons for that, by the way. Sometimes if you've taken something like, let's say, lead-based pills or mercury for syphilis in a past life, then you're going to be the kind of person where aspirin doesn't kick in, meds don't seem to work, and you take twice as much Novocaine at the dentist, because the soul is going, we are not letting anything come in and kill us like it did before. Seen that so many times.
It's funny, I've got a patient that comes to mind right now, and that's exactly the conversation I had with him. I said, don't know what you do, but I give you this lidocaine and it just disappears. In fact, it has no effect in his body. It did the first couple of times, but now it's got no effect. I thought, well, maybe you're a fast metabolizer, which just means you take medications and you spit them out as soon as they come into your liver, because they just metabolize quickly. And oh my gosh, I never thought that could be a reason.
Exactly. Who thinks about, who thinks, oh yeah, must be the lead pills they took 200 years ago, but I mean, like, I really do think I think past life work is, I think, the one therapy that I would really hope that everyone will be using. That would be my dream, that because, I work with a lot of therapists and counselors, and even like, talking about Reiki practitioners, people who are working on the body. They often talk about getting messages coming through. They might be working on somebody's foot or something, and they start to get a past life or something coming in. And I think more and more of that will be happening. I expect that people will get more comfortable with the idea of past lives. I mean, it's still sort of seen as woo-woo or weird, or do I really have past lives? To me, it's crazy, because I honestly think reincarnation explains everything. There is nothing about we humans that doesn't relate in some way to our past lives. All our talents, all talents are past life abilities. All fears, like I was mentioning, all phobias are past life related. And so I think if you're not taking past lives into consideration, then you're missing a huge component, huge potential for healing as well, especially when things are stubborn, they're not shifting, and maybe all it takes is just a bit of understanding of what happened in the past. I mean, I've really seen, like I was saying before, so fast, the healing. And at some point, I'd love to team up with, with somebody like you, or someone who's in the more mainstream, because I think, especially with things like fertility, there's such a, connection there between things like dying in childbirth, or having a horrible cesarean without anesthetic or something in a past life, and the resistance in this life to having a child, to giving birth, so all sorts of areas there that I think, like a two-pronged attack, where you got like the physiological stuff being taken care of, maybe you've got the emotional, mental stuff being taken care of with a therapist, and then you have somebody like me being able to sort of give that additional perspective. I think it will be the way forward, really.
Well, we are a mind, body, and spirit, as we've said at the beginning, and it's time to be at least looking down that angle and opening up, so we can optimize our healing, because healing is what we are, I believe, in the inside. That's the essence of the soul. It's the essence of our spirit.
Oh yes, absolutely. The soul is driven to heal. That's a really interesting point, because your soul, whatever you've got going on, if you've got anything that is, I don't know, causing you discomfort or disease or whatever, the soul is never saying, oh, that's just life, we'll just have to let it go. The soul is always like, okay, how do we overcome this? How do we get back to that sort of optimum state that we should be in?
Exactly.
The soul, I always say, the soul has no self-pity. It's just totally pragmatic. It just says, okay, we've got an issue, let's fix it. Let's not, sit with it. I hear people saying, oh yeah, I feel I'm just meant to sort of suffer. No, you're not. It's like not how it works.
I love it. Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, from the granite city back home to the west coast of America, I thank you, Ainslie, for your journey. Your
well, thank you, and well, back at you as well. Thank you for what you're doing and getting this stuff out into the world.
Yeah, solutions for pain. That's what this is all about. So yeah, thanks for contributing in a big way. It's been great to meet you finally. And
well, lovely to meet you, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Okay, thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.